Well, hello. On this episode of Third Pillar Thursday, we are going to talk coastal encounters. Now, for those who are not sure what Third Pillar Thursday means, it is I am the self-appointed third pillarist. The first pillar is combat, second pillar, social interactions, but the third pillar is exploration. And in my understanding of exploration is not just finding knowledge about the environment, but using the environment, using the setting as a backdrop, as a prop to enhance your role playing um, setting and materials and encounters. All right, so today we will talk coastal encounters, um, coastal regions, places where the land meets the sea or the rivers. Now, one one great equalizer in role playing games and is not often used is water. Um, Oceanic, underwater regions, and sometimes it can be a little daunting for a dungeon master or a game master to use those, especially if the players really want some sort of aquatic adventure. But it's not really necessary to do that if you want to just include just a little sprinkle of the water, just a little taste to get used to how to using the rules, um, and discovering how threatening it is to the level of your player characters. So one really great way to do that is to use a coastal encounter. So a coastal encounter will allow you to use amphibious and oceanic or river-based creatures that can come on land, have an encounter, and then maybe return to the sea or to the rivers or such, whether it's freshwater or saltwater, which maybe at the end I'll talk about that. But for the most part, um, what can happen is that instead of just using the same options of I hit it and it hits me, I hit it and then it hits me, and ad nauseum, a great tactic is to have the enemies drag the player characters underwater. So if you have giant alligators or giant crabs or some kind of tentacle beast or merfolk or river folk that use nets and tridents to incorporate your grappling rules. Um, in fifth edition, it's pretty simple. You just roll to hit. If they hit, make some strength challenges, strength versus strength. Each side rolls d20. Add your bonuses or modifiers, or add or subtract your modifiers. High roll wins. Boom, you're grappled. Boom, drag them down into the water. Now, unfortunately, for say fifth edition and some other games, sometimes the drowning rules are not conducive to the high um, elements of adventures. For example, in fifth edition, a normal human can hold their breath for equal to 1 minute plus their con modifier to a minimum of 30 seconds, because there are people who have less than a 10 constitution, which means they would have a negative modifier. But that doesn't simulate the stresses of being pulled down underwater, being attacked, the chances of being stabbed, and then also begin drowning. So you can modify this as long as you are narratively consistent and explain it to your players. Maybe instead of 1 minute, maybe they have that many number of rounds, or you can express it in number of minutes, but every time they are attacked, if they maybe they need a con save or what have you, and if they are attacked, they lose half of that time. So if they can hold their breath for 3 minutes and they are attacked, now it's down to 1 minute. Maybe then it reduces down to 30 seconds. Since a round is 6 seconds, when it gets down to about 6 seconds, maybe they start drowning. Now, the drowning rules in fifth edition mean that you drop to 0 hit points and you have to start making death saves. Sounds pretty brutal, but drowning is pretty brutal. You could instead of trying to measure like lung capacity or whatnot, you could instead apply a D4 or D6 con damage. And when their con runs out, they start drowning. So if they are pulled underwater, they take a die 6 loss in con. And then again, if they're still grappled and are underwater, they lose a die 6 of con or something of that nature. You come up with maybe each round they have a con save, and if they maybe it's like a cumulative effect. So they make a con save, and if they miss it, maybe they're like stunned or something because they're choking a little bit, and then maybe after 3 missed con saves, maybe they start drowning. So you can decide for yourself something that creates tension, that creates that pressure to want to escape the water and arrive at the surface if they are, of course, air breathers. There are some racial types or spells that allow people to breathe underwater, but their effectiveness in and around combat is it's all based on you. So, okay, so we also have the idea of grappling being pulled into the water. Well, how far away are they from inland to be pulled in water? So are they on a ship? Are they on a beach? Are they on a rocky cliff over and around the watery surface? Maybe the creatures or the attackers that are attacking the PCs can drag the people. I believe you can take use the shove or knockdown maneuver. I believe it's called shove, but they can move them 5 feet. Well, if they're 20 feet away and they're grappled, maybe it'll take them 4 rounds. 5 feet times 4 is 20 feet. Maybe it'll take them 4 rounds to be dragged into the water. And so now they have the opportunity to fight off their attacker before they're dragged down and possibly suffocate and whatnot. Now, but we're talking about attackers. We've introduced alligators or merfolk or some tentacled beast or giant crabs or something, but we can still use the environment to ramp up the tension even without the attackers. For example, there's a storm surge when the tide rolls into the beach. Now there are like lazy beaches and it's just nice and calm, but that's not really exciting for adventure. We want like storm surges where 60-foot waves pound the coast and whatnot, waves that dump over top of sailing ships. So how do we incorporate that into our setting, into our encounter? Well, you could do a randomizer, maybe roll like a D4 and say, well, you roll a D4 and you rolled a 2. So every 2 rounds, a big giant wave is going to come crashing onto the shore or onto the docks or over top of the deck of the ship. Or it might be each round. So you roll a D4, you just leave it on the table, you let your players see it. And then as time goes on, maybe you flip the die or you just count down and you go, you're looking at it and they're looking at it and they're wondering, why is the DM or the GM staring at this thing? You kind of mentally counting down and going, okay, on the 3rd round, boom, storm surge hits, you roll the die again. Maybe it happens again on that time. So what would storm surge do? What would that high tide, those crashing waves do? Let's maybe make some dexterity acrobatics checks to keep your balance, or strength athletics checks to hold on to something. You can use both. Apply a DC, DC 15, DC 13. You could make it random. You could roll a D10 plus 10. You could roll 2 D10s and add them together. You just, as long as you're narratively consistent with what you're doing, your players should go right along with this, unless they're not used to you using the environment. Now, remember, if you have adversaries that are not adapted to the sea, for example, let's say the player characters are fighting criminals on a beach, or they are, fighting guardsmen on the local docks and the storm surge pulls in, the storm surge should affect the adversaries just as much as the player characters, which can add some pretty interesting elements. So let's say they fail these saving throws or these skill checks or what have you. They fail a dex save to remain standing. They fail a strength save to grab onto something before they're knocked down. Maybe they fall prone or drop an item. Maybe they're pushed away from pushed further inland, or maybe the storm surge knocks them down, and if they fall down, maybe the next time the storm surge comes in, it will drag them back out to sea. So opponents being separated, maybe I would hesitate to add in opportunity attacks from being slammed by the water as such, because it would come as kind of a surprise and overlay over everyone, but it can really change the battlefield in very odd and dramatic ways while they're fighting on the beach and such. And of course, those that want to, extricate themselves into a safer location probably have to do so. Maybe struggle against winds, climb to a higher location. Of course, escape the battle, disengage, and then move to another location, forcing them to maybe have to use ranged attacks or something of that nature. Water's also resistant to, fire. So maybe the storm surge wipes out any kind of fiery effects. Maybe it wipes out a wall of fire, or does harm to a fire elemental that's on the beach. That fireball that the mage absolutely wants to cast every round, maybe it's extinguished or mitigated because the sailing ship that they're on is just too damp, it's too wet. Maybe there's rain as well that's going on in high winds that would affect that. But also we're talking water. So a good rule of thumb for me is give and take. So give and take just means that if I apply or decide to apply some sort of disadvantage, either literally, disadvantage rolling 2d20s and taking the lower, or figuratively, meaning applying some sort of hindrance to some kind of spell effect or character's abilities to do something, I like to add a benefit, and one that's very organic. So in this case, electrical attacks might have more of an effect. For example, someone might have like shocking grasp spell that requires them to touch someone, and maybe now they can touch more than one individual, or they have a range of 5 feet because they can send out an arc. RP Gamer says that there's usually many naturally formed caverns and caves and cliff sides where the players could take shelter in, or possibly get pushed into by the waves. And what a great way to introduce that great dungeon crawl that you want when the tide lowers and then the players are able to enter into the cave. But then the fear is that as the tide rises, the cave system begins to flood. So now you have yourself a timer, flooded dungeon systems and caves, and that can add an even greater element. RP Gamer also says, which although they're taken by the waves, they would then gain a benefit of being in the cave, right? So maybe the storm surge pushes the player characters who end up falling into the cave, which might actually give them shelter from, say, an enemy or outside influence. Maybe there's thunderstorms going on and what have you. But yeah, using the coastline and the waves coming in is also possible. Of course, in 5th edition there's difficult terrain, so wet sand, rocky shorelines, those kind of things would absolutely be difficult terrain. But you can add even further things to that, where you may have sinkholes, kind of like a quicksand, but just little eddies of undertow, and swirls of temporary and instantaneously created whirlpools of water that can really surprise people and pull them down into the surf, or have them trapped between rocks, or pounded against the surf and have their bodies crushed against rocks. Can also be a possibility, especially if they're fighting in waves of water that are like above the knee. When you start getting into water that's crashing against the surf and you're waist deep or higher, it's extremely powerful. And so the player characters and adversaries could be in trouble if they are heading towards a specific location. Maybe their ship was dashed against the shore, or there's a cave entrance with runes that basically point to this ancient crypt, and they need to get to it. But unfortunately, the storm surge is coming in, and they have to fight against it and push. Maybe you have skill checks to move against the surf, maybe 1, 2, or 3 skill checks to get to a safe location. And each time that they fail, there's a chance that they may get injured or hurt. There's also the possibility of just diving underwater. Remember those encumbrance rules that we all ignore? Maybe it's time to start pulling them out a little bit. And you can again, if we're narratively consistent, we can hand wave that away and just say, okay, is your character lightly encumbered, mediumly encumbered, or heavily encumbered? And just eyeball it. Like, okay, well, if they're in like leather armor and they have a dagger, you might go, all right, that's light. And then if they're in medium armor, with a backpack, you say, well, okay, that's medium. And then if they're in like metal armor with like 2 or more like huge metal weapons and a shield, a chainmail or something like that, you may say, well, okay, you're heavily encumbered. And allow the players to have some say in it, but get back to the gameplay. I wouldn't argue the point, although if they're carrying hundreds of pounds of gold on their hips and nothing else, that would have a detrimental effect as well to pull them under. But a good rule of thumb could just be use the rules for armor. If the armor applies a disadvantage to stealth checks, have it apply a disadvantage to athletics checks to swim. RP Gamer says, you mentioned a tomb. The truth is pirates and smugglers use the natural caverns to hide and bring in goods to avoid the authorities. And so once you hear a rumor about that, or one or more of the PCs are part of or know about pirates and smugglers, great way to have an encounter in a location, especially if the pirates follow the PCs and say, hey, I know these adventurers are probably going to steal our gold. Let's go make sure it's still there. Or the PCs are pirates themselves and smugglers, and the authorities are going after them. Or the location where they leave their stash is being inhabited now by a collection of giant crabs that love this little haven that they've created for themselves, or merfolk, or it's endless stories you could tell just using those little cave entrances. And like I said, if they're beginning to flood, now you can add this added additional element. So you pull out your maps, you got your cave entrances, and then you have this this threat of the water filling into the cave system. So you can say, okay, well, now it's at ankle length. Your boots are soaked, not a big deal. But maybe electrical attacks start to spread out from one or more of the casters, whether it's from enemies or the PCs. Maybe the water starts to come up towards the knees, and now you have to worry about difficult terrain, or tripping and falling and then being pushed down and drowned, which might be another combat tactic that a player may use. So the rogue sneaks behind the orc chieftain and pulls the orc chieftain down underwater using using like a sneak attack. Maybe now the orc chieftain has to start making those con saves and what have you to avoid being drowned or being dragged away underwater or something like that. Maybe there are a number of spells that a player character can use, like an entangle spell or something like that, or a grease spell, to get someone to slip and fall or get pulled down underwater. Of course, using that to their advantage as well. Now, imagine being in a dank, dark dungeon cave system. The water is coming in, it's flooding in, filling the place, and then the undead starts scrambling and pulling at the ankles of the PCs. nasty stuff. Maybe the crocodile swims into the cave opening, a location maybe that it could not get to, but once the crocodile or the piranha are able to get to the player characters now, or the electric eels or something, or even sharks. Now they can get into the cave system, start swimming around, attacking the player characters while they try to scramble around looking for the treasure. Maybe the pirates are inside as well. They understand. Maybe there's a secret exit to escape, and so now they have to find that secret exit, or scramble to it. So anyway, the idea is to use the environment to create tension, to create a win situation that does not revolve around it killing you or you killing it. That this may be a case of survival and needing to escape a location, beating the clock, having the pressure force the PCs to move from one location to another. And so therefore, just because the barbarian or the paladin in the group can smite everything with hundreds of hit points does not necessarily mean that they are the most effective at this time. Maybe those that are unencumbered and quicker can move to safe locations, while the other player characters that are the damage dealers take and suffer damage and cause damage to allow others to escape or get to high ground and whatnot. So yes, absolutely use coastal encounters, use coastlines, beaches, floodwaters, storm surge, those kind of things. RP Gamer also says, at what height of water would you add difficulty to movement? I would start at like maybe the knees or the waist level. I would say probably start at the waist and then move up from there. Waist level, chest level, and then you're under. So maybe disadvantage at like waist level, and then when they're like chest level, wow, I just put a severe limitation on movement, because it's very difficult to like run through water. It would almost benefit you to start swimming through the water. So maybe not just difficult terrain, which basically halves movement, but also maybe strength or dex use. Maybe like strength athletics or dex acrobatics to remain upright and effectively move through the water in a in a manner that is nonsensical. That is not nonsensical, rather. Yeah. Also, there's the idea of vision in the water. So based on how clear the water is, as if you're in a dark and dank cavern, you may not be able to see predators that come and swim between the legs and below you. So, and dark vision, while it does make darkness into dim light and seeing in black and white may not allow you to see through water that has a lot of silt in it, or dirt in it, or ocean water that is very green and blue. Christy Rand, what's going on? Use real world movement in water. I'm not sure what you mean by that in terms of real world, by translating it into a role-playing game. I would default to being narratively consistent. Oh, thanks for the like. It's not necessary, but thank you very much, and thanks for joining. I would say apply a consistent reduction in movement. So you could say, for example, you have a reduction of 10 feet each round or each period of time that the water starts to rise, or start having movement and keep having it. So, when it's waist level, you're half movement. When it goes to chest level, we're going to have that again. When it gets up to your neck, we're going to have that movement yet again. RP Gamer says also the deep water would allow sea creatures and predators to enter the caverns. Absolutely. And Christy Rand says flood waters will always be full of debris. And see, there's another hazard there too. When you have not just the predators coming in, but the debris. loose rocks, driftwood, maybe the ship that the player characters were on, or a pirate ship, crashed against the shoreline, and so now you have floating debris. That debris not only is sharp and can penetrate, but is also heavy and can move and bludgeon the hell out of individuals. One rule of a thumb that we use here at Critical Hit Publishing is the rule of even the odds. And even the odds just means to grab a die, and you want to, it doesn't matter what die you grab, but you want to roll, you want an even result. So you want to even the odds. If you get an odd result, that means you are the target of, and then you fill in the blank. So for example, before the next round of combat starts for the player characters, or next period of time, you have everyone even the odds. Anyone that rolls an odd result, that means you're probably going to get hit by debris floating in the water. And that debris can, may not only be sharp or piercing or bludgeoning, but it could pin people to the ground, pin them against a wall, pin them between rocks, that kind of thing, knock them unconscious, knock items out of their hand, et cetera, et cetera. RP Gamer says, if the debris is heavy enough, it could be used to weigh the players down and to cut risk of pushback. So for example, right, if they are held back by a heavy load, now the players may have to spread their attention from their adversaries and maybe give a help to the wizard, who needs to beat a DC 15 check to lift this debris, and may not be able to make that kind of check. But if given help, get that help action in there, get that advantage, get that debris pulled off of them, and get the hell up out of there, because they may start drowning, especially if they're pinned on their chest and then the water level is still rising. Again, predators, hanging around their legs, water levels rising, maybe someone trapped will start to drown. You can create all kinds of dramatic, intense situations when it comes to using just coastlines and the water lines in your world. Where are some other things that, they were on the tip of my tongue too. I always start these live streams with just a couple of sentences and that's it. There's also the idea of land-based actions having an effect in the water. So for example, mudslides and rock slides, enemies on dry land, maybe on a cliff face or on the docks, that may try to push player characters into the water, or capture them or attack them and force them to retreat in wave motion. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I mentioned that about the motion of the waves. The waves could absolutely pick up people, smash them against rocks, and then pull them back out to sea. Yes, wave motion is surf strength, absolutely. And so therefore, you give yourself a randomizer, or you say, hey, once every 1, 2, 3, every 6 rounds, or what have you, again, being consistent, that everyone needs to make a strength check, or they're just going to get picked up and slammed against the rocks. And then the next action is the sea is going to pull back out, so that prepping for that new wave coming in, and so then they get pulled back out in the undertow to get slammed right back into the rocks again. Undertow, of course, is a possibility too, with eddies and whirlpools. So maybe on the rocky beach, a misstep means that they have to avoid these almost like quicksand in a way, and whirlpools that can drag a person down, and then they have to fight to get to the surface, even though it may only be maybe a 10-foot section. Christy Rand says, suffered a close head injury as well as rotator cuff tear while surfing. I have not surfed, but I have a huge respect for the ocean. Those who do surf understand all of those hazards, and they have a healthy respect for what the ocean can do. Even slight changes in temperature and depth can have a dramatic effect on how the waves interact with land, and interact how surfers and swimmers can interact on the surface versus diving below. For example, maybe the as the the dungeon master or game master, you allow the players to say dive under a wave so that they are not tumbled and pushed back, so they can swim outwards um, to maybe a safe location at a ship, or maybe a ship is sinking and they need to save their PCs. Okay, here we got only one Des says sand might get in your eyes. See, there we go. You have the idea of adding yet an additional hazardous element, because storm surge or waves would just um, churn up that soft silt on the bottom, and so sand just getting in someone's eye, blinding them temporarily, might have an effect. And let's talk about a little bit of mechanics. There are plenty of spells that say cause this effect on an ally or an enemy that you can see. And if you're blinded, maybe you can't see to heal one of your allies if you're a cleric or something like that. RP Gamer says a PC getting pulled out to sea would lead to an adventure in itself. Maybe the players abandon the fight and go after them, or you could split the party and have the PC washed up in a different point. And Christy Rand says water in the eyes as well. Yeah, salt water. The PC's getting pulled out to sea. And again, here we go with splitting the attention. It's just creating this other dynamic where one or more players can get pulled out to sea. Does the barbarian and paladin that can deal out all that damage, do they keep fighting the giant crabs, or do they go save their allies who are being pulled out and have a chance of drowning, who right now are blinded by like sand, salt water in the eyes, that kind of thing. Hell, even storm surge, when the waves crash over you, there's a chance that for just momentarily you are disoriented, or there's a chance of being disoriented and not knowing where you are, where your opponents are, if you can see them at all. Of course, losing items. If you're walking around with the belt pouches and a backpack and things stuck in a boot, there's a chance of losing small items in the water as well. So there's a perfect opportunity for those rolling those 1s or 20s if you're using a D20 system by having something fall. Only one Des says players are fatigued from swimming. Here we go. Perfect, right? I mean, how exhausted would someone try to be trying to swim in chainmail armor and a shield and 50 pounds of gold and a greatsword, right? Exhaustion levels. RP Gamer says sounds nasty, Christy. I can't even swim, so I'm very respectable to sea, especially living near it constantly. I see people become trapped because they haven't kept their eye on the tide. Yes, and Christy Rand says DC checks. I see many. Yes, lots of DC checks, and of course you don't want to. Okay, I bring these things up as third pillar options, not to say that you should apply all of them, but saying that you could like get a 3x5 card, write down a couple of ideas. When it gets boring, boom, throw it in there. Yes, it's so easy. Easy to. RP Gamer says it is so easy, even without distraction, to lose track of the tide. Yes, those maybe you have your players make a survival or nature check who are used to having that coastal life. And so maybe they're aware of it and they can yell out to their allies. But for myself, I would have zero idea. For example, as we know today, in Hawaii, they're going through volcanic activity. And so that volcanic activity, and that's maybe I'll flow that into another third pillar next week. But they are going through a ton of natural environments that where the lava and the volcanic activity is interacting with the sea. So not only could you be affected by the salt water and the sand, but if you have volcanic activity, there is a steam rising, there's sulfuric or sulfurous materials rising from the ocean floor. There's of course lots of silt and carbon in the air. There is that's going into the water. So yeah, that's even a whole new other thing about using volcanism. But Hawaii is an island state, and they have many islands, and so of course they have to be used to entering and exiting the water and understanding how the water interacts. So those players that are coastally have coastal knowledge may know when to swim for it and when to stay out of the water and say, okay, guys, next round we're going to get slammed. We need to hold on now. So one possibility is to threaten. Christy Rand says the main island has 5 volcanoes. Someone sounds like they either live there or have been there many times or knows what they're talking about, which means that someone needs to school me. But for the game master, you could say, okay, instead of just attacking volcano, yes, instead of attacking the player character's hit points, you can attack player characters' resources. And I don't mean, oh yes, you lived it, cool, sweet. Wait a minute, what time schedule are you? I start at 6 in the morning. You must not be getting any sleep at all. Wow, thank you for being up. But the idea would be that you can attack a player character's resources, and I don't mean food and water, although you can challenge those, but you can attack player characters' bonus actions, movement actions, statistics, strengths, dexterity, constitution. So maybe it takes that bonus action you want to use for your attack. Maybe it requires you separating your attention to hold on or to be aware of the tide. And so therefore the player characters now have to make a decision. Do I spend my bonus action to attack more adversaries, or do I use my bonus action so that I don't have to roll to be pulled out by the storm surge? Full Metal State says, hey gang, spell can get quite interesting in those conditions as well, both trying to cast and unpredicted results. You could make a laundry list of spells and effects, but I would say, like Full Metal State is suggesting, that just be narratively consistent. So, whereas absolutely fire is probably not your best tactic to use near water, electricity may be, although you may have unintended results when you use that lightning bolt or shocking grasp, because maybe another PC might get pulled into that. RP Gamer says definitely, especially electrical or fire-based spells. It's Christy Rance is about 1230 plus. Oh, all right. I hear you in that. Not too bad. Yes, electrical attacks, you may say, okay, guess what? All electrical attacks now are of the same level spell that have an area effect. So like a lightning bolt now operates like a fireball in water, whereas a fireball or fire-based spells probably would be at a minimum giving everyone resistance, if not complete immunity to such. In our game, some used a fireball in a refinery. Yeah, this makes things from bad to worse, right? What are some other spell effects? Like you could use, I don't know, a floating disc maybe as a place to hold on to. Maybe a levitation spell to save someone who's drowning in the water. A rope trick spell, hoping to keep the ocean water from coming up into the rope trick. Definitely, druids would be awesome, although they're not really spells, but druids would be awesome in terms of shape changing into something more appropriate in water. I mean, you could, ice. Full Metal Stasis, ice could be vicious because not only is it cold, but you could trap someone in ice, and then they could then be trapped and either pulled out into the ocean or slammed against rocks. telekinetics works very much to either save people or hurt someone, using telekinetics to push an enemy away from safety, or using maybe using telekinetics to have a rope maybe wrap around a um, a, a PC, an ally, so that they don't get dragged away. Um, I still think ice, because ice is going to float to the surface, so you could wrap an enemy's like arm or something in ice if you're underwater, and then that ice then starts to pull them to the surface of the water. Or you could use ice on like a ray of frost or something on the deck of a ship, like in a storm, and that would very easily have people start slipping and slide and maybe fall off the deck. Or coating ice onto rocks on the coastline, which would you make it nearly impossible to climb. So yeah, RP Gamer says, depending on how powerful the ice spell, you could unintentionally freeze everyone in place. Which, can you imagine a comedy of errors that has, where everyone's standing in ankle deep water, and then all of a sudden now everyone's ankles are frozen in place, and here comes a 50-foot wave. Only One Dead says, the fire and water could be used as a distraction. For example, fire plus water equals steam. Funny you mention that, because in the Cinematic Virons books that I help write with the guys at Critical Hit, our Aquatic Depths book actually mentions the idea that when you cast fire spells underwater that have a duration, like a wall of fire, that it creates a column of steam from the point of origin on up. So yes, we actually did mention that, and yes, steam could be used as cover, to obscure an escape, to blind adversaries. So if you're being attacked by sharks or some tentacled beast or merfolk, and you create a big cloud of steam, this might be an opportunity to either then attack them by surprise, or have your allies swim to safety, or something of that nature. Especially if you try to cast a fireball underwater, I wouldn't say that it doesn't work. I would say it does work. It just has a different effect. Christy Rand says scalding damage as well. Yes, just because something doesn't catch on fire doesn't mean the fire does not activate, because you're essentially creating like a small, like, nuclear effect in a way. So you could absolutely scald a shark or something that's coming to attack the wizard, especially if you're about to get swallowed, and you just, like, the wizard's like, look, this is the only thing I've got, and I just boom create this scalding blast of hot steam and bubbling water that goes to the surface. Absolutely. And this is a way of, as the game master, this is your way of being able to say, to not have to use the words no, but instead of saying that, you go, well, instead, here's what happens, right? And now this allows the players to say, oh, wow, things are different. How can we use this? And if they use it to their advantage, let them. That's the whole point. The environment is absolutely great to use or abuse. RP Gamer says, would it be okay to say that I've done a few of my rambles about the coast? I would say you've done a few, most. By the way, the guys in the chat, go check out RP Gamer, RP Gamer's YouTube channel. Check it out. Go like, subscribe. I love his ramblings as he walks the coast of the bird sanctuary. Kind of peaceful to me. So and I learn a little bit too as well. So yeah, and here's the thing, right? When I start these live streams, I tend to just have a few bullet points in my head, but as you guys are noting, there's a ton of great ideas you can use for a coastal encounter. And we haven't really even talked about what kind of monsters you can add to your coastal encounter. Not only are there a ton of aquatic creatures, but you can reskin darn near anything. Already subbed. Thanks, Christy. Thank you for subbing. I really appreciate it. I hope that um, that I can give you just a little bit of a boost during the day. Just something to think about. I have my brain is always crowded with ideas, and I don't get to play as much, so I'd rather share them. And yeah, guys, thanks in the chat for being social with each other. I have some of the most brilliant and socially positive people that interact with me. Um, Everybody else, all those negative people, I'm so glad that they have not found me. So, great place to hang out. Guys, thank you so much for coming up with ideas, just shooting in anything and everything you have to say. By the way, I am very easy to approach. So the easiest way is to join Critical Hit Publishing. It's just me, Alex, who's Captain Gothnog, and Rob Davis, the Swamper, and we are Critical Hit Publishing. We do a lot of things. Coming up, we are releasing a small mini adventures called Adventure Keys, and I will talk about those. I'll show some things to you coming up, but yeah, they'll be coming out about every 2 weeks, and they are reusable adventures that you can easily deposit into your own gaming world. Also, of course, I have my YouTube channel, heading towards 300 videos or so. Many of them not too good because I tend to ramble quite a bit. But if you're into more of a podcasty, vloggy kind of videos, I'm the guy for you. So anyway, I'm DBJ, Dave Brian Jackson. DBJ is perfectly fine, including all the nasty and rude DBJ derivatives thereof. You guys, Only One Des, RP Gamer, Christy Rand, Full Metal State, thank you for joining me. RP Gamer says I'm going to second how easy and great DBJ is to chat with. I have no problem communicating with anyone. I'm in my own world up here in Central Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, in the States, and I don't get to communicate with people too often. So guess what? I reach out and I'm like, hey, how you doing? If you have ideas. Now, I do work a lot. So I work a 60-hour week, Monday through Saturday. I work 6 days a week. So I may not be able to respond to you immediately, but I will respond to you. Christy Rand says, rather listen to ramblings than those who will not listen. you, uh, you make a great point. As you can tell with the gray hair, I am kind of a grognard. I'm a little old. I've been playing role-playing games for 40 years at a minimum. But there's always something I can learn, right? I have yet to find a situation where there isn't a day where I cannot learn something new from somebody else. I could care less about age or, all the other things, religion, creed, or whatever like that. I'd rather, it benefits me to find other things from other people. Full Metal State says, this has quickly become my favorite part of the day. It's incredible how just listening quickly spurs great ideas that have never crossed my mind. Thank you, DBJ. And you're very welcome. Thank you. Okay. If I was talking out into the void and didn't interact with people, I'd be in my own head and I'd get stuck in this, treadmill of not moving forward. And that's where I love interacting with people, because sometimes you just need that little push. Like, man, I had this great idea, but I just can't. Boy, I want this one thing, and all it takes is someone to say something small or get your mind turning just to get the cobwebs out, and you go, oh shit, yeah, now that's a great idea. Now I know where to go. So that's my intention. So during the week, of course, every day I do a different themed video, but they tend to run the same idea where we pick a topic, we start to talk about it, and just allow the ideas to wash over you. So if you have an idea, this my entire series is for you to steal the ideas. So steal them, have fun with them. I'm not sure what Harry is 72 means from you, Christy Rand, but I'm going to dwell on that all day today. Um, anyway, guys, thank you for joining me. I, of course, am DBJ for those who don't know. You can spread the word if you wish, but I just appreciate you guys interacting with me. And if you have any, don't hesitate to give me criticism as well. For example, ideas. Hey, can you talk about, and then fill in the blank. Leave it in the comment section. Also, if there's something you'd like me to return to, fill it in the comment section. If I've mispronounced or said something that I called you out your name without knowing it, just let me know and I'll acknowledge it then as well. So, including Prue, who isn't in the chat, but I know Prue, you're out there. You're one of my peeps. Love you. Have a good one, guys. I'll see you later.